Good morning, Diary. I don't know, I should have stayed at home really, after what he's been talking about. I don't know what will I say. I suppose I'll try and give an overview of who we are, what we do in rural development, how we drive innovation in rural development, and I suppose I'll give an outline of a practical project that we've done over the last 4 years in a small region, the size of County Louth within this county, in Eris, which has been very interesting and a very good learning path, which is a project that we're trying to replicate at a number of levels throughout the country. So what I'm going to do is I'll just give a small introduction about myself and our organisation, then look at what framework we're working within when we discuss community development, and specifically innovation and community development. What are we talking about? I'll give an outline then of the case study and how it all pulled together, and look at some of the outputs, look at some of the innovation that came out of that project, and look at some of the results. And then maybe for later on, probably more than this presentation, but look at possibly the new horizons for communities in energy, where or what things are coming down the track, and where or how will communities respond, or what are the opportunities. And if you're bored at any stage, just fall asleep, that's no problem. I did a play here about 2 months ago. Some people left at half time, fair enough. Gaeltachta, we were born in 1979. We were actually born somewhere in the 1890s with Congested Districts Board, which was a function of the UK administration in this country. And we evolved over time through Gaeltachta and became a semi-state body in 1979. Really working with the Irish-speaking language on primarily the west coast of Ireland. The population in our region is roughly about 100 to 120,000 people, and we really live on the extremes. We live on the coast, and it is probably one of the least developed parts of the country. What we do is we're engaged with economic, community and language development in that region. At the economic, we do the role of the IDA in Enterprise Ireland, whom we work with the service level agreement, so we attract FDI, foreign direct investment. We administer somewhere in the region of 6 to 7 million euros worth of grants per annum to companies, and we have about 7,500, touching towards 8,000 by 2020 people working in our client companies along the west coast of Ireland. And we have about 400 factories in different states going from the tip of Donegal to the bottom of Cork. From the community, we are of the community. Our board is elected by the community. We live in the community. We have been engaged in community development since, I suppose, somewhere back in the 1950s when we started with the first factories, Gaeltachta, and we also support community development. Our methodology is to work through local co-ops. We have about 30 of them countrywide, who we provide support for to have a manager, and through them we run schemes such as the resource scheme, Tools Boss, of which there's about 2,500 people working, and through those schemes in association with the co-ops throughout the Gaeltachta. Language development is our core, our raison d'etre, as I speak in French, or try to. That is why we're different. We work in a place where the Irish language is still spoken. A challenging, a minority language on the edge of Europe, in a monolingual society to a certain extent. It has been a challenge and will continue to be a challenge to maintain that as a living language. We start with the Mayo, which is the preschools, of which we have 74 that work through Irish throughout the Gaeltachta. Then we walk up through the teenage years with Munsters and Old Gaeltachta, through youth clubs, services for youths, and then we do the arts as well. And lately, as a result of the 2012 Language Act, we are involved in language planning, of which there's 26 regions nationwide. And we've just begun that process. There's 2 in Mayo, locally, 1 in North Mayo and 1 in West Mayo. And Tumbakady is in with Joyce Country or Dúchiogaich. They are taken as a geographical basis, not on a county basis. It's where the community are from or where they identify themselves with. So, I suppose sustainable communities is what we're about. So, for ourselves in renewable energy, as an organisation, we got involved somewhere around 2009. We did some internal pilot projects with support of the SAEI. We converted our own offices to biomass, and we've took energy efficiency measures in our head offices and our regional offices. Then from 2012 to 2015, the communities in our regions became involved with the BEC as it came on stream, and the warmer home schemes was probably a great introduction. The Iron Islands, I think, started with the warmer home schemes, and they're probably our leading light in their objectives from sustainable and community. But there's also other communities that have engaged with that project, especially in Mayo and in others in different parts of the country. In Mayo, we kind of engaged at a number of levels. We had a European project called GRID, which was looking at smart grid and the implications of smart grid in relation to energy supply and the opportunities it created, and also whether or not smart grid was a better low carbon solution than conventional grid. As which seemingly turns out the engineers in Leuven, or professors in Leuven told us anyways, would save somewhere in the region of 20% on the carbon footprint compared to conventional grid, if you had a smart grid. We also had a BEC, which we worked with industries, Údarás BEC, and then we had a local pilot initiative, which was a partnership between ourselves and the Gaeltachta Council and the local community to actually deliver a project in the Erris area. So. First thing I was going to talk about is what is innovation in the community, or how do you drive it, or what are we talking about? And innovation is a funny thing. Innovation is knowledge. It's creating something out of knowledge. It's creating new knowledge, or advancing existing knowledge. Theoretically speaking, and I'm not a professor or anything like that, but the approach to innovation was understood as a triple helix approach somewhere around 2000. And a lot of the state supports in this country have derived out of that understanding of innovation. And it was that the universities and industry and government were the prime drivers of innovation. So we set up things like Science Foundation Ireland, invested heavily in our R&D functionalities in the universities, and the government was on board from a policy perspective as well. However, that understanding of innovation and the drivers of innovation has evolved. And in 2009, they brought in another thing, which was that the media and the culture is another additionality that drives innovation within the areas you're working, as well as the three main components. And more lately in 2010, the environment has been brought in as another driver of innovation, and it's called the quintuple approach, or quintuple helix approach. And that's the approach that we've been using in ours to look at how to drive innovation within the communities. So you have the government or the political system, you have industry, you have education, you have the media or the culture you live in, the understanding that people have of things, and also the last thing is the environment as being a potential source of driving of innovation. I have a handwritten copy, but basically in the middle you have sustainable development, and around it you have the 5 drivers of innovation into sustainable development. And then around those areas you are just transferring knowledge between and around. And if you apply that to a community as a driver of innovation, it shows you there are many factors other than just the community itself that will drive innovation within the community. Okay, so that's not the theory, right? But we do have a framework that and an understanding of what we were working off. So how we did it in ours on a case study approach, we took it as a micro approach because it was in our locus of control. In other words, we could do something about it, rather than, as many rural communities could say, well, we know nothing about that, that's outside our control. There are things within your control, that is your locus of control. So we took out our political system, which was our councillors, Mayo Council, our TDs, the media and the culture, the natural environment, the asset utilisation, the sustainability, the cross-cutting techniques that you could use with asset utilisation, the education system and the economic system. And we used both the BEC and the GRID project to engage with these 5 components of innovation to drive new things in the region. So we used, for example, meetings, seminars, to bring the councillors on board, because there's no point looking for planning permission for something if the local councillor or the local planning office is not aware of the technology you're talking about, the implications of that technology, the change of that technology can bring through. So you have to educate them, and you have to give them an opportunity to respond as well. Same with the media and the culture. We had a communication plan, a stakeholder communication plan, so that all stakeholders within the system would be communicated to, so that you could actually influence what the media and what the community were thinking, because you had a constant message. The natural environment, what we have, is probably the best area in Europe for wind energy, which has been recognised with the development of the Atlantic Marine Energy Test Site. And we have a wide expansive bog. We have natural gas, a lot of natural gas on our doorstep. We have wind, and Moon are developing a wind farm up there at the moment, a joint venture, I believe, and that's very close to starting. I think construction has started. We have lots of wind, lots and lots of wind. And we also have people who are knowledgeable. We counted one, you would think an area like ours, biggest town is 1,500 people, but have very little knowledge. We did an exercise to find out there was about 25 PhDs living in the area. So just because an area is rural doesn't mean it doesn't have knowledge. So, and that's a mistake that certain organisations make when they look at rural areas, that there's no knowledge. There's often knowledge, and if not, there's the way of accessing knowledge, and you have to be aware of that. And the education system was the most difficult, because we don't actually have a university locally. The nearest city, UIT Castletown, is actually around Galway, so it's very difficult to engage with the education system. So we did it within our locus of control, with the national schools and secondary schools, put in a BEC, put in an education programme, talk to them. So the kids were talking to their parents, and suddenly renewable energy or sustainability was an issue that could be talked about in the house, or why are they doing that, or what's that PV doing there, or how does that work, or what are they doing. But those questions were being answered before they were being done. And it was the community that owned the PVs, it was the community that owned the electric vans, it was the community that owned the halls that we were working with. So it was of benefit to them. And often we think of community gain and we think of community engagement, and it's very, very seldom about finance. It's very, very seldom about, I've been 20, 25 years in this game, very, very seldom about finance. It's about enabling the community to live the life it wants to live for itself. And maybe that's something we should consider when we're looking at major projects impacting on local communities. That often it's and it took Shell a long time to learn that lesson. They threw money at it. It wasn't about money. It was about engaging with the community and getting involved in what the community wanted for itself. So our practical approach, for 5 years we've been working. If there's any questions at any stage, we'll probably take them after Seamus. And if you're falling asleep, just tell Seamus there, he'll tell a joke. He'll tell you already. At Gaeltachta, as an organisation, we've been working with our factories and with our client companies. It's a 5-7 year approach to increase efficiencies in our factories and their processes, more efficient boilers, more efficient production processes. What's the catch for them? Obviously, there's 30% grant aid, which that means they have to put 70% together. So they have to look at an ROI. And the ROI for an SME, a small SME, which is mostly what we attend to, is probably next year, because they mightn't be there the year after. So, and that is often for community groups as well. So they're looking for quick wins if they're making investment decisions. Do I spend money now for fruit in the future, or do I pay the wages on Friday? So we have to understand when we're working with these companies that they have different perspectives and different demands on their resources, which tend to be limited. So a lot of that is about talking to them and about going through the figures, and do you know this works? I'll tell you now, I know a fella that has that machine and it ain't doing what it says it does, you know. So, and it's often a hard sell, and I wouldn't blame them. You know, I own my own company, I'll be looking at, do I pay the wages on Friday or do I invest for, 2 years' time? But we keep working with them, and it's about money with them. The RSBC, the total investment was roughly somewhere in the region of about 800,000 over 3 years. The first year we just did pilot projects. We didn't want to scare people, and we wanted to kind of say to them, have a look at this. If your community hall is kind of run down and you're not using it because it's too cold, well, we'll do one and see how it works. And you can go to them next year and see if that works for them. And we took one hall in Bangor. Investment was somewhere in the region of 60,000, I think, the first year. I won't say derelict, it was used, but there was about 15 heaters going on at the same time. Built in the 1940s, no insulation, sand and stone. Now you have to book it to get into it because it's warmer to run, and they don't have to put as much oil and gas into the hall to keep it going. Simple conversation, but it's used by the community. It was empty, and once you have an early success, the others will follow awful quick, as we found out. So year 2 was about mainstreaming. So it was about doing what we did, but doing it in more projects. Year 3, which is this year, it's about integration. And what I mean by integration is when you see a new build coming on, be it a new community hall or something, or a new community wheelchair association came on this year, new build. They wanted PV in their build spec without any grant aid. So now you've integrated the thought processes of saving energy into the community, and they're thinking about it rather than looking for grant to do it. They were demanding that PV was put onto their building for wheelchair users. It's a new build. So that's what integration is about, and that's really the next step when grant aid runs out, that it becomes part of the norm. You can do a regulation, which would be seen as a cost, but if you do it with ethos or a understanding of the benefits, then it's seen as a benefit. So, on the great project, why we got involved is we live on the west coast of Ireland, a long way from Dublin, certainly a long way from Brussels, certainly a long way from the sources of power and knowledge. So one way of transferring knowledge and gaining knowledge is engaging with European partners. And we found the great project excellent. No, we don't have a smart grid in Ireland. I know, Ruth, you're working on it. And they don't have it. Most of Europe doesn't have it. You know, there's no point. But if you walk, as we did, walk into the place in Belgium where they were controlling their power, they had to buy 6,000 megawatts a day. Right? And they were wondering if nuclear power plant was going to come on stream in France, or was the wind farm in Germany going to sell the electricity for them at the price. And when you see their thinking processes, then you kind of understand how it works at a bigger perspective. Obviously, in this country, we're limited. We've only one interconnector, maybe 2 interconnectors that are full. Possibility of another one into France, which will bypass the UK, which would probably be of help, because if you've only one interconnector to the UK, really you've only one market. And that has actually stopped an awful lot of investment in wind energy over the last 10 years, the lack of connectivity into the European grid. And these things we were learning about, but instead of turning it into I'm not having a grid here, or I'm not doing this here, the conversation was about, well, how do we transfer our asset and get money into our community? How do we do it? And you would have, and we're Airgrid or fighting with it or whatever, in the sense that you have overhead power lines and you can see the benefits, the economics of them. There are other technologies, there's HVDC, there is a number of other technologies that can be used. But unless the community that you're transversing or engaging with gets a benefit, a direct benefit from that, they are going to oppose you, and they will cost you money, and they will cost you a lot of money, and they know how to do it. So that engagement process has to start at the very, very start, and the conversation has to be about benefit to them. And that's where smart grid comes in, that you can actually sell locally, you can actually sell by time, all these kind of things that we just cannot do with conventional grid. It also enabled us to look at what's coming down the track. Is microgrid going to be the future of energy in small towns and small rural communities? Are they going to go off grid? Is the Powerwall going to do that? Is battery technology going to do that? What happens if it does? How does the business models for the utilities work? What if there is no business model for the utilities? What do you do about the hospitals then? What do you do about people that need energy right here, right now, that you mightn't be able to do with the microgrid? So there were the things we were learning as we went along, and we shared that knowledge as much as we could. So what we did, buildings, process upgrades, 50 companies, 14 community groups, somewhere in the region of 2 PVs, 2 electric vans, very nice demonstration project down in Granny, 15 miles from the nearest town, I would suspect. Not a shop in the area, nothing in the area, just a church. and a new building they actually had in the converted part of an old building. They put 2 meals on wheels, cost them an arm and a leg, weren't getting any money for the overhead, were getting money for the meals, but where diesel was costing them somewhere in the region of €80 a day. The ovens were costing them somewhere in the region of €20 a day. So they installed a 11 kilowatt PV array on their roof, saving them somewhere in the region of 200 in the winter, 250 euros per month electricity cost, and in the summer that drives somewhere towards about 600 euros. And that was a bill they didn't have to pay for diesel or for gas. And they bought an electric van and they delivered the meals on the electric van. So when the ovens weren't working, you plug in your electric van and it will operate as a battery for your PV, so you get an optimum utilization of your PV. Very, very innovative use of technology. Core problem, running these meals on these cost me too much money, you know. So they do about 500 to 600 meals every day for communities. So we've had a number of them. The most interesting one which we did was Paul Thomas National School. The kids were coming into the school. The school was built in the 1920s. Kids were coming into the schools in the summer with overcoats. And all we had to do was put in new windows, new doors, and some LED lighting, and some insulation work. I don't think the project cost 10 grand. I don't think it did. And 40, 60 kids, they don't have to wear their overcoats anymore going to school. And the Moratos and Papas don't have to buy them their overcoats to go into the schools. And the impact that has by just simple installation, simple expenditure, you're getting into a whole community just working with one facility. So I've gone kind of through that. One part of the great project, and I know you're involved in the European project, that we found very good was the SME engagement. We had a voucher system, and what we were doing was matching up companies transnationally, and 2 of the match-ups resulted in getting 2 contracts. One an Irish and a Scottish company got a contract worth about 800,000 for an ocean energy development in the Orkneys, and another company working with a Dutch company got a 2 million contract in Rio working on power management. So it was actually creating collaboration, which is another form of innovation, obviously. But by introducing small companies together and small technologies together, early stage technologies, they don't have the money to go out there to the trade fairs. They don't have the money really to do anything, and they're really focused on their technology. And by enabling collaboration opportunities with them for very small money, again, the vouchers were 2,000, 4,000 euros worth. We got a lot of book return for our book. 3 other companies went over to the Netherlands where they're building, I think it's 400,000 passive houses, I think. Massive. Yeah. Sorry, yeah, it might be. And they're actually tendering in there for some work. So, I don't know if I'm on track or how I'm out of time or whatever, but I'm really finished. Thanks. So what are our outputs? In our area, it's an old community. We live in old communities. Our young go off to college. We regenerated them. We've got them out of their houses again. We've got them talking. We've got them in sheds up and running. We provided their facilities. We made the facilities useful, cost effective. If you're a community group, you don't want to be standing at the church gate anymore on Sunday, collecting a few €100 to pay the electricity bill to keep it going. We have to get away from this concept that communities are an economic, that they create their own economic benefit. Some of them do, some community enterprises do, but some of them are just social services. And we just have to differentiate between social services and community enterprises. And we have to look at different approaches. What we were looking at was at the social services end of it, making it a social, making it a livable community, making a place where you could live. And that's where we got the most benefit. The community enterprise, like I spoke about, yes, obviously, if you save money for a community enterprise, probably working somewhere in the region of 75–80% state aid, then have to range to 20% collected locally or collected off services. If you can reduce their costs, you're making a massive impact for them. The SMEs, by lowering their running costs, the ones that did come on board with us, it makes them more viable, makes them more sustainable. Because energy can be, in some processes, can be very, very high part of their expenditure. In some company, I think it was about 25% of the cost, and they got it down to 20%, so they were saving a lot of money, and makes that company more sustainable, makes them invest in other areas, make their production more efficient, all that kind of stuff. The other outputs was the local technical capacity. As you bring in PV, as you bring in insulation, we often think, it's a month off. It's not really, because they're going to have to be maintained. They could be evolved over time, where, like I said, the IWA insisted that they had a PV. Now there's 4 PVs in the area. There's probably another 3 or 4 coming up. There's a few houses actually. There's one house, typical, but don't want to be racist, but it's a German lady, and she was the first one to put PV into Belmullet about 10 years ago. Cost an arm and a leg, and she couldn't sell it back to the grid, which we won't talk to her about, but that's another issue. But there is maintenance issues there for them. There is connecting them into your metering system. There's all this small technical stuff that we don't see under the surface that has to be done to solve those problems. And it provides employment opportunities. In the education, as I said, we only worked at the local school levels, and that's the future. But it's also the present, because they talk to their mummies and daddies. So it's key to get into the education system, practical into the education system, and give the benefits to them, and they can see themselves rather than talk about it. Because everybody talks to a kid, but when a kid sees something, he learns an awful lot more, or she learns an awful lot more. So, what are the outputs that we've had over the last 4 to 5 years between what we've done and what we've been trying to influence to get done, and where the government has invested and the CI invested? 850 square kilometres, population of about 10,000 people. I think it's outside Siberia, it's the least densely populated area in Europe, in Western Europe, as far as I know. So we live with small little towns, and they, as the county chairman or the county chief executive said earlier on, we have to reimagine these small little towns, the 20 people, the 40 people, or if we don't, they're going to be gone. And one way of reimagining them is making them hubs of energy efficiency and energy generation. So what we have is 4 PVs raised, 11 kilowatt each, with a microgrid test bed, 2 electric vans working in community groups. All the local schools are insulated. All community centres, about 9 of them done. The social capital we got out of that is unreal. The amount of new user groups, mince sheds, drama groups. When I came to Belmullet 20 years ago, there was no drama groups. Today there's 4 with an average number of people, of about 30 people involved. 3 of them have come on the last 3 years because their local hall became available again. So when you see places run down, there's a reason they run down in communities, and it's usually money. So if we can save costs for them and regenerate them, you get out the use of them. Our factories, LED lights, insulation, we've done. Our factories were built in the 70s and 80s, needed a bit of an upgrade, and like working with the SEI on that, and it's very helpful. And that marine energy test site is coming along slowly and surely, but we hope that it becomes like the Orkneys. Yes, wave energy is a long way away, but we have one local company who are TRL level 6, we're going to quarter scale, TRL level 7, and they hope to, if we can get the technology, to run their research out of the Belmullet area once we get digital. So that will create somewhere in the region of 15 to 20%, just the one company. If you look at what wave energy has done to the Orkneys, to Kirkwall, and those areas where there's usually 10 to 15 machines in the water, it's a great economic boost to the area. There's also a private marine energy test site being developed, and we're working with SEI on having an SEC for the whole Gaeltachta region, and we're the person working on that. So they're the outputs of what we have. So I was asked to speak about innovation in rural communities. I can speak about innovation all day, by the way, if you want. But the most important thing for our community is to understand that innovation has a risk. It may not work. And that's one of the things we found out with the microgrid. We had an early stage test battery at Renewable, totally recyclable vanadium oxide redox battery, not really working. We have the PV in there, we have the grid in there, control mechanisms in there, but the battery is not really working. It's on its third iteration now. There is a risk with innovation, not all of it succeeds. But, you know, if you want an omelette, if you don't break the eggs, you ain't going to get an omelette. You know, so sometimes you're going to have to take risk. And people are often very, very afraid of risk. The electrification of society, what I talked to you about was little place in Granny in northwest Mayo. If you go into Brussels, or not Brussels, Arnhem we were in, 6% of their fleet is electric vehicles. Last year, 6 of new sales. Electrification of society is coming down the tracks much faster than we think. It's going to be enabled, it's being enabled by technology. I think most manufacturers now have an electric vehicle. We have upgrades of grid systems taking place, we have new energy production systems taking place, we have smart meters coming into place, all that kind of stuff. That is what happening. Electrification of society is coming down. Electric is going to be probably the driver of society into the future. And how do we do that in a rural area? One of the challenges we have with the e-cars, there's only one charging spot in Belmullet. The nearest one is 50 miles away. Now, if anybody knows anything about e-cars, 50 miles is fairly close to the limit of their capacity to go, you know. And if you turn up in Ballina, which happened, and they were collecting some supplies, and the one in Ballina wasn't working, car was stuck, you know. So there is a whole thing of infrastructure for the electrification of society that we have to really go after. And that bad, I'm not taking that car out again, I'm not going to Ballina again. We guarantee it, one in Ballina has fixed its work, you know. But that's a conversation that really kills technology if you go too early and the infrastructure isn't there. And that's the risk element you take with being trying to lead. The financial innovation, the BEC worked for us because we had private sponsorship. Shell actually had put money into a community gain fund, and there was 5 million in it, which was administered by the council. And as well as getting the BEC, which was about 50% for community groups, we were able to access another 30% of private sponsorship through that fund. And now suddenly your ROI, you're talking community groups, is down to between 1.7 years and 2.5 years, which is the window that that committee is probably thinking about. If you go to them with an ROI of 6 years, I won't be here in 6 years. So something that we need, again, if it's a social, I think we often confuse community. I'd have no issue with the community enterprise limiting it at 50%, but as a social enterprise, I think we have to look at higher percentages to make them come forward. And we need to make that differentiation in our structures of funding. The SME innovation was collaboration was creating collaboration between companies and getting the test bed for the microgrid technology up and running, hopefully soon. And once we do, then we can bring in technology that's going to be around the whole management, or companies that are engaged. There is a test bed in Dublin, a small test bed, and there's a test bed at Cork IT. There's one in Tala, and we're also hoping that this one will be more at the technology end of it and testing technology rather than seeing how it works in houses and stuff. So it's going to be for companies, and that's what we're aiming for. So, I suppose to finish off, second last slide, what could happen into the future and how will our rural communities respond? How is the grid going to evolve? Will it remain conventional? Will it become a number of microgrids? Will there be a smart grid? Will the smart grid happen? Will it be, as some commentators say, an internet of the grid becomes like the internet, that you have so many small little microgrids and they're all linked together and they become the resource for if one falls down that the other one steps in. Would that be the future of the grid? Different things are happening in different parts. In the US, where solar has evolved significantly, especially in southwest US, it's becoming the internet of the microgrid. And there's an awful lot of off-grid microgrids. So we have to look at these things we have to consider. Or it could be a combination of all three. Power generation. Is it going to be conventional as we have? Is it going to be distributed? Is it going to be localized? Is it going to be on the roof of your house? Are you going to have the Tesla Powerwall? Are you going to have the Japanese solid-state battery? That's probably more effective than the Tesla one. And you're working off PV off your roof. It'll come down to economics. We can see what economics is doing with solar. The price of solar has dropped 80% in the last 5 years because the Chinese have gone into manufacturing it. Now it's economic without tariff, to be quite honest. All you need is battery technology. If I was in the US, I can buy a Tesla for about $5,000. It'll probably be in the Irish market very, very soon. I think they've distributed or wanted, I'm not certain. But. So, is power going to get that localized? Is every house going to do its own power? Like in Germany, in some states, you won't get planning permission unless you put PV on the roof. You know, so, and that has implications, because if every house is generating its own electricity, do we need big power stations? Do we need big wind farms? You know, or do we need a combination? Probably a combination like everything in life. So, what could happen? This disruption is called an innovation, disruptive innovation. Low cost generation, you could have micro solar, you could have micro wind. So saw a very interesting project in West Germany, near Arnhem I think, where they're building trees that are actually generating micro wind. They look like trees, but they're generating power and they're putting them up on the streets. So the power is being generated, it just looks like a tree. And it's small little turbines instead of the leaves. That's creating the power. It's called microwind. There's a few other technologies in microwind. That could be coming down the track. Microdigestion. Take any technology. It has the capacity to disrupt. Smart technology, power balancing, and power distribution. Say if you took Balmullet, for example, a small little town, 1,800, well, 1,200 to 1,500 people. What if it had its own wind farm or its own solar farm? And how would you manage that across all the houses within the town? So if everybody turns on the washing machine at the same time, suddenly we have a problem if we don't have enough wind or you don't have enough solar power. So you come into the area of power balancing and you come into the area of selling power and buying power. There are legislative difficulties. There is a single electricity market coming down the track, allegedly, at a European level. Theoretically, I could be buying my power from the south of Spain every 15 minutes, potentially. Smart grid can do that. So smart grid does evolve. It has that capacity. New technology, data analytics, big data. How is data going to be used? For example, I'm aware of a company that are using their technology to capture the amount of people that are walking the street to figure out how much light is required on that street at that time. So it's just using data. And it's being smart. So you have smart technology based on data coming down the track. It's going to come down in power as well. And the digital sphere can do that. The big question, the big thing that can change things is legislation. Slow in this country. Most of our legislation is driven by European directives, and even when they come, we don't tend to adapt them in some cases until the very, very last minute. But at the same time, it can have a disruptive influence. Social adoption and smart energy. That comes back into the community. If power generation changes into the community, how would they adopt? How would they take it on board? How is it going to, for example, I think Basildon was one of our partners in the UK. They put smart meters, the UK government I think somewhere, put smart meters into a number of houses to control their heating systems about 7 or 8 years ago. Survey did after 3 years, only about 20% of people were using them. But they look nice on the wall. So how do people engage and take on board the technology and use it? And how do we get around that? Environmental probably will be the major driver of innovation into the near future. What if there is accelerated climate change? Have we reached peak oil? Are companies pulling out because they pulled out of the Arctic? They're going to probably pull out the North Sea because the price of oil and gas is dropped below its economically viable to recover it. What happens then? And as the environmental changes, will the political will towards environmental solutions get stronger? Will our politicians understand that the environment is actually a key component of our future? And would the political will towards it change? It can, and it does change sometimes. So these are things that we have to look at kind of into the future in our communities, how we respond if these things happen. So the final slide, they might need coffee now, Seamus, with solid coffee after this. What we hope to do in our response, work with Ruth and have our sustainable energy community, so we have a system to respond, like our old co-ops. We have a way of engaging immediately. Training and education is going to be key. Economic, if we can make our SMEs move towards a low carbon, sustainable future, then they become more competitive. From a carbon perspective, but also from a cost perspective. Because the likelihood is that the cost of energy is not likely to decrease, it's likely to increase. Especially if tariffs start getting withdrawn as they have in the UK, and if that becomes European wide, who's going to pay for energy? Somebody's going to have to. We're driving our companies towards research and development and innovation. Our innovation partnerships, Horizon 2020. For example, we've a company in Galway that have just got a H2020 to develop a composite-based wind blade of 90 metres, which I think will be 1/10 the weight of a conventional wind blade, which makes it an awful lot more interesting. So it's driving our companies to take their existing technologies and move into the new era. We're also toying with the idea of developing digital green hubs where digital is the enabler, but the hub becomes the generator of new things. So if you look at, say, digital technology and how our technology companies have evolved, we have an awful lot of programs like accelerator programs, startup programs. Can we apply that to the green sector using digital technology, using the same methodologies to get new solutions, new companies, new startups? So that's kind of cross-cutting. So taking a technique from one industry, putting it into the green industry. We're looking at developing that concept at the moment, and smart grid and Auckland would be one of those that would be looking to get into it. We think that it's very easy to talk in here, because I'm probably talking to the converted in most cases that they're here already. But, as we can see with Trump and different levels of politicians, some politicians need to be convinced. So we need more and more demonstration projects, and we need more and more people showing the benefits of them practically on the ground. When we launched the electric van, we had the Taoiseach down to launch it. He was shocked that actually a small community in North Mayo were relatively advanced in technology and actually delivering local services using new technology. So I know that's at the highest level, but we need to do it at every political level, because that's how you affect change. And the media, in today's media, Facebook, Twitter, whatever, everything is media, especially the millennials. Maybe a few of them here, I don't want to be bold to anybody, but we need to share probably need to have an open innovation approach to innovation in the communities. We need to share our data, we need to share our knowledge, we need to share our experiences, and there's no point reinventing the wheel. And if nothing else comes out of European projects, I think that is one of the major things, if we can drive that forward, because we're all working in the same game. It's not a competition, it's a co-opetition, and we need to work together. So it's about developing that message, getting that message across, that for the future you're probably looking at open. It's how Apple and Facebook have done it. They get other people to develop their apps, give them the platform, who develop the apps. It's open innovation. So that's the way major industry is going, and we probably need to do that in our communities as well, and learn from one another. I hope I haven't sent you to sleep. I have no more to say, Seamus. I hope I get no hard questions, and I thank you for your attention for me.